Give me little extra buttons. I don't need your little extra buttons. We don't need your stinking buttons. Okay. No, wrong one. There we go. Boy, it's confusing. Hello. Happy holidays to you all. And wanted to tell you, just in case you were worried about this, not only is the sun coming back, but it was not eaten by a giant bird. It was not subsumed in a battle with a monster. The sun has not decided to desert us because we are human and therefore sinful. The sun is coming back. Not only that, here's even better news. The sun actually started coming back several days ago, December 21st, actually. So we're already along the track towards sun returning, spring, planting season, all that stuff. It's going to happen. So any of you who are in a kind of a bit of a panic about that, no, don't worry about it. No, we are still in the wheel of seasons and everything is working just as planned. So don't freak out. Speaking of that, I'm going to do a quick poll because I can't decide what to read, and I will bow to the will of the majority, or at least the majority who bother to contact. And that question is, are we going to read the Christmas story, which admittedly is a light, fairly silly Christmas story called The Sugarplum Wish, or are we going to read more of Witchwood Crown? So feel free. You could put, let's say, WC or X for Xmas. And just drop me a quick note so I have an idea as to which one we're going to do, and we'll see what is going to be the choice. So there we got a first vote in for, got 2 votes for Witchwood Crown and 1 vote for Christmas Story. Okay, that's all good. Anyway, I just wanted to tell you guys, Ivan, you're not allowed to vote twice. I wanted to just quickly just chat with you guys about, because I've been thinking about all this stuff. You know, it's been a weird last few years in a number of ways. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that most of us don't go through, so I'm not claiming that. But it was interesting because back in the day when the Dragonbone Chair books and all those were first coming out, people used to always write to me and say, you know, what religion are you, or are you religious, or, you know, stuff like that. I noticed that, you know, the religious characters, that you don't make light of them, or, you know, and there's obviously an analog to Christianity, because the book was originally considered back when I first, back in the mid 80s, when I first started writing the Dragonbone Chair, it was originally set in an unknown part of the real world. And some of that stuff carried through. And because I wanted the contrast between sort of what we would think of as Western medieval Christianity and a wider and stranger world out there, I used a Christian analog in the Osiris worship. And for those of you who don't know, both Osiris Adon, Osiris obviously comes from Osiris, or more specifically from Osiris's original Egyptian name, which was User, and Osiris was, of course, a classic died and came back to life Messiah god, and Adon, which is from the Persian Adonis, and is another what's the word I'm looking for? Martyred Messiah who comes back to life, a solar deity in essence. Whereas although Osiris is of the line of Ra, he is not technically a solar deity, I would say, not like his son Horus is. Osiris became a god of the dead, but also was a god of rebirth and all that. So that stuff runs through lots of religions, and I used that in the Dragonbone Chair books. But more importantly than that, it's interesting because I've really, my whole thing with religion has changed over the years. I've mentioned to you guys many times that I was not raised religious. And in fact, no, there was never anything negative said about religion, and in fact, my parents used to go down and help out with things at the local congregational church. My dad installed the light bulb that was baby Jesus in the Christmas pageant one year, and another year we actually used my little brother, which must have been Stuart, my middle brother, as the baby Jesus, and my mom and dad were Joseph and Mary. My dad's name was even Joseph. But there was never any action. I don't think we ever did anything else. I think the kids went to like a daycare thing there or something like that. We were just not a religious family. And when I was younger, with the certainty that the youth often have, I was very anti-religion. You know, like a lot of people. I kind of felt like, oh, it's this crock, it's this thing that people use to sell other people and to get them to give up their individuality or their rights or any number of things. And I was very negative about it. And then over the years, I kind of went through this change, and I haven't changed my own personal thing. I mean, if I'm anything, I'm kind of a scientific rationalist, which means I am continually open to the concept that there are things in the universe I don't understand. But I also want to see some kind of testable proof of these things when people profess them to me. And if they can't, if those things are not provable, then I put them on the shelf that says interesting, but who the hell knows? And to be honest with you, most religion fits in that category for me. I find religion and in fact any discussion or tale telling about how the universe works to be fascinating. But I don't put much stock in any of it. However, the one thing that has changed for me over the years is that more and more as I got older, I began to realize that the kind of religious impulse is clearly pretty universal in humankind. And that whatever negative purposes it has been put to over the years, it is also a source of solace and hope and faith, and in a sense is a stand-in for certainty that the universe is a good thing. Now, I don't think the universe necessarily is a good thing personally. I think the universe is simply the universe, and we are simply in it, and I don't personally believe somebody has a plan for my life. Although, like anyone else, I will say things like, well, the universe wanted me to do this, or God put this in my way saying, go get it, big guy, or something. I will personify the forces of reality. But personally, I'm not a believer. But I am more and more as I get older, much more, I don't want to say tolerant, because it was never about tolerating. I've always tolerated other people's beliefs, obviously, even in politics where they can do me personal harm. But as I have gotten, moved on through life and seen the value that believing in certain things and certain structures and certain gatherings of people and belief in certain kinds of things do for people. And the part of me that was, when I was younger, that was very anti-religion and basically looked on it as, some kind of a trick or scam, that part of me is largely gone. I am now a huge believer in, if it does you good, if it makes you a better person, a happier person, a more secure person, whatever your beliefs are, as long as they do not lead you to harming another person, then they are okay with me. And what I think it's very important, actually, that people find the things in life that make them feel secure and important to the universe. So, I have my own path to that, and it's complicated, and I'm not going to try and explain why I think that I mean something in the universe, because there's also a part of me that knows, in one sense, I probably don't. 4 billion years from now, or whatever, when the sun is beginning to expand into its red giant phase, and humans have passed on to other planets or have long since killed ourselves off. I don't think that there's going to be anything or anybody saying, whatever happened to Tad? I really want to know whatever happened to Tad. Yeah, he was a heck of an interesting guy. No, I don't believe any of that, and I don't believe I will still be around in any kind of form. But I do think that as John Lennon said, and then John Lennon said, "Whatever gets you through the night," and then Andre 3000 of Outkast said, "Whatever floats your boat or finds your lost remote." And I'm a big believer in that. I definitely am. I think if you believe something that is healthy and gives you strength and security and helps you to be a better person, I am all for it. And that's really where I stand on the whole thing. So anybody who wonders what my religion is basically kindness. My religion is basically trying to imagine what another person or people are feeling like and to use that to help understand them before I judge them. And yeah, that's what it comes down to in the end. It comes down to kindness. It comes down to sharing the planet. It comes down to how can we structure the universe in our heads in a way that makes sense. And everybody has different ways. Some people have close enough ways that they join into religions, and that's fine. Other people are a little quirkier, or they've got their own individual ideas. That's good too. It never hurts to think about things. It never hurts to try to make sense of things. So anyway, I don't know why I got on that whole tangent, except that because I've been working on my Ostenard books again, and I've been thinking about that and the fact that there is no, for me anyway, there's not meant to be any sort of separation between the folklore or religions of one group of people versus another group of people. There is nothing that is superior or inferior. There's not one that works and one that doesn't. The ones that work tend to work because the people have learned things and they have a certain faith in their own ability to make those things work. But beyond that, there is no, oh, religion's wrong, but magic is right, or vice versa. So anyway, let's go check back and see if anybody's left any messages here that will give us an idea. Comments. Oh, God, it just took the comments away again. Just give me the darn comments. And of course, everybody's talking about the religious part, and which is nice, but okay. But now I have lost all trace of. Oh God, I hate this. I truly, truly hate this. Why does this thing always do this to me? Why? All right. I want to see the comments. Why is it not letting me? Oh God. Why do I even try? Why do I even try? Okay. I have lost that whatever any of you said, and I apologize for this. It is now not showing up on my screen. Timothy Evans asks, what am I most looking forward to this next year? I'm currently I am looking forward to having the Navigator's Children out finally. That's my personal what's the word I'm looking for? Selfishness is that I really, I've been done with this book for a long time. It's the culmination of many years of work, and I would really like people to be able to see it so we can have arguments about it. So, okay. Ray, I think I already tried that, but thank you. Okay, so it seems like most of the James, that's really good news, by the way. Most of the news seems to be Christmas Story. So I'm going to read the Christmas Story, but you'll still get to hear the Witchwood Crown because I'll go back to it again. So in that sense, I guess it's a win-win. So bear in mind, as I said, it's a very slight Christmas story. This was not one of my dealing with the big issues kinds of things. This is much more one of my, it's Christmas time. And I don't actually remember why I wrote the story. I don't remember if I wrote it for an anthology or if I wrote it just to write it, which admittedly I don't do very much because I just don't have that much time. Anyway, so I am going to read it. So all of you sit down, get out your nog, and whatever else you might want. And I don't know how long it's going to last, but I think it'll probably take till the end of the hour. So anyway, and as I said, please realize this is just a frothy kind of a story, in the sense that, yeah, you got it now. I've said it enough. Okay, so I'm going to read. And the story is called The Sugarplum Wish, and then in parentheses, A Christmas Story, just to emphasize, by me. Danny Mendoza counted his change 3 times while the teacher talked about what they were all supposed to bring for the class winter holiday party tomorrow. It was really a Christmas party, at least in Danny's class, because that's what all the kids' families celebrated. Danny had his party contribution covered. He had volunteered to bring napkins and paper plates and cups because his family had some left over from his little brother's birthday party. They had characters from Gabba Gabba Hey on them, and he knew he'd get teased about that. But he didn't want to ask his mother to make something when she was so busy with his little brothers and the baby. And now that Danny's stepfather, Luis, had lost his job, they had a money situation. Danny could live with a little teasing. Danny was going to buy a candy bar for his mother, one of those big ones. That was going to be his Christmas present to her, and Danny knew how much she'd like it. He hadn't just inherited his small size and nimble fingers from her. He'd got her sweet tooth too. And she had just been talking about the Christmas a few years ago when Luis had a good job with the sanitation department and he'd brought her a whole box of C's chocolates. Danny knew he couldn't match that. But the last of the money he'd saved up from raking leaves in the neighborhood and walking old Mrs. Rosales' wheezy little dog should be enough to buy a big old Hershey bar that would make Mama smile. No, what to get wasn't a problem. The thing that had him thinking so hard as he went down the street at a hurried walk, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, was whether he dared to get it now or should wait another day. In Danny's San Jose neighborhood, the Mercado Estrella was like an African waterhole. Not only a crucial source of nurture, but also the haunt of the most fearsome predator in his third-grade world. Any stop at the little market meant he risked running into Hector Villalba, the big, mean fifth-grade kid who haunted Danny's days, and often his nights as well. Danny couldn't even begin to guess how much candy and other goodies Hector had stolen from him and the other kids over the years, but it was a lot. Hector was the elementary school's public enemy #1. About half the time his victims got shoved around too, or even hit, and none of the grown-ups ever did anything about it except to tell their humiliated sons they should learn how to fight back. That was probably because Hector Villalba's father was a violent, drunken brute who didn't care what Hector did, and everyone in the neighborhood was as scared of him as the kids at school were scared of his son. The last time someone in the neighborhood had called the police on Hector's dad, all their windows had been broken while they were at church and their car scratched from one end to another. Danny was still trying to make up his mind whether to risk stopping at the market today or wait for better odds tomorrow, when class ended early because of the holiday, when he saw Mrs. Rosales walking Pinto, her little spotted dog. He almost crossed the street because he knew she'd want to talk to him, and he'd spent a lot of time doing that already last week when he went to her house to get Pinto nearly every day. He was too close, though. She'd seen him. And Jesus hated being rude to old people almost as much as he hated it when kids lied, or at least that's what his mom always told him. Danny wasn't expecting much from Santa anyway, but if Jesus got upset, things would probably be even worse. He sighed and continued toward her. "Look who's here," Mrs. Rosales said when she saw him. "Look, Pinto, mi querida, it's your friend, Danny." But when he waved and would have passed by, she told him, "Hold on a moment, young man. I want to talk to you." He stopped, but he was really worried that Hector and his friends might catch up if he stood around too long. "Yes, Mrs. Rosales? I shortchanged you the other day." She took out a little coin purse. It took her a long time to get it open with her knobby old fingers. "I owe you $1. "Really?" Danny was astonished. She pulled out a piece of paper that looked like it had been folded and unfolded 100 times and handed it to him. "I know. Boys need money this time of year." He thanked her, petted Pinto, who growled despite all their time together because Pinto was a spoiled brat, and hurried toward the market. Another $1! It was like one of those Christmas miracles on a television show. Like the Grinch's heart growing so much it made the x-ray machine go sproing. This changed everything. He could not only buy his mom's present, he could buy something for himself, too. He briefly considered blowing the whole dollar on a Butterfinger, his very favorite. But he knew hard candies would be a better investment. He could share them with his younger brothers. And it was Christmas time, after all. But whatever he got, he didn't want to wait for tomorrow, not now that he had something to spend on himself. Danny Mendoza had been candy-starved for days. Nothing sweeter than the baby's butterscotch pudding had passed his lips that week, and the pudding hadn't been by his own choice. His baby sister had discovered that if she waved her spoon, things flew and splattered, and she liked that new trick a lot. If he hurried to the market, he should still get there long before Hector and his friends, who had many children to harass and humiliate on their way home. It was a risk, of course, but with an unexpected dollar in his pocket, Danny felt strangely confident. There had to be such a thing as Christmas luck, didn't there? After all, it was a whole holiday about Jesus getting born, and Jesus was kind to everybody. Although it sure hadn't seemed like a lucky Christmas when Luis, Danny's stepfather, had lost his job in the first week of December. But maybe things were going to get better now. Maybe, as his mama sometimes said, the Mendoza family's luck was going to change. He was even more willing to believe in miracles when he saw no sign of Hector and his friends at the market. As he walked in, Christmas music was playing loudly on the radio, that Joy to the World song sung by some smooth television star. Tia Marisol, the little old lady who ran the place on her own since her husband died, was trying to hang some lights above the cigarettes behind the cash register. She wasn't his real aunt, of course. Everybody in the neighborhood just called her Tia. "Oye, little man," she called when she turned around and saw him. "How's your mama?" "Fine, Tia Marisol. I'm getting her a present." He made his way past the postres to the long candy rack. So many colors. So many kinds. It almost seemed to glow like in one of those cartoons where children found a treasure cave. When Danny was little, it was what he had imagined when the minister at the church talked about heaven. The only better thing he had ever seen in his whole life was the huge piñata at one of his school friends' birthday parties, years and years ago. When the birthday boy knocked the piñata open and candy came showering out and all the kids could jump in and take what they wanted, that had been amazing. Like winning a game show on television. Danny still dreamed about it sometimes. Danny realized that he was staring like a dummy at the rack of candy when every second the danger that Hector and his friends would arrive kept growing. He quickly examined the big Hershey bars until he found one with a perfect wrapper, a massive candy bar that looked as if it had been made special for a commercial. He would have loved to spend more time browsing. How often did he have a whole dollar to spend just on candy? But he knew time was short, so he grabbed a good-sized handful of hard, sour candies for sucking, took several different colors of candy ropes. Then, as the worry grew inside him, as uncomfortable as needing to pee, he finally snatched up a handful of bubble gum and ran to the front counter. "What's your hurry, mijo?" Tia Marisol asked. "Mom needs me," he said, which he hoped was not enough of a lie to ruin Jesus' upcoming celebration. After all, Mom did always need his help, especially by this time in the day, when she'd been on her own with the baby and the littlest brother since morning, and had just walked the other brother home from preschool. He pulled the $3 worth of much-counted change out of one pocket and mounded it in front of Tia Marisol, then put the Hershey bar and his own handful of candy down beside it before digging out the crumpled dollar Mrs. Rosales had given him. She slid her glasses a little way down her nose while she looked at it all. "Where'd you get so much money, Danny?" "Raking lawns, taking Mrs. Rosales' dog for walks." Tia Marisol smiled, handed him back 23 cents, and put everything into a paper bag. "You're a good boy. You and your family have a happy Christmas. Tell your mama I said hello, would you? Sure. He was already halfway through the door, heart beating. The Christmas miracle continued outside, other than a couple of young mothers with strollers and bundled-up babies, and the old man who sat on the bus bench across the street, drinking from bottles and paper bags. The area around the store was still clear. Danny began to walk toward home as fast as he could without running, because he had the bag under his coat now and didn't want to melt Mama's candy bar. Still, he was almost skipping. He was so happy. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Hey, Mendoza, someone shouted in a hoarse voice. What's in the bag, maricon? Danny stopped, frozen for a moment like a cornered animal. But then he began to walk again, faster and faster, until he was running. There was no question whose voice that was. Pretty much every kid in his school knew it and feared it. Hold up, Mendoza, or I'll kick your ass good. The voice was getting closer. He could hear the whir of bike tires on the sidewalk coming up behind him. He looked back and saw that Hector Viaba and his big, stupid friends, Rojo and Chewy, were bearing down on him on their bikes, and in another second or two would ride him down. He lunged to the side just as Hector stuck out his foot and shoved him, sending Danny crashing into the low wire fence of the house he was passing. He bounced off and tumbled painfully to the sidewalk as Hector and his gang stopped just a few yards ahead, now blocking the sidewalk that led Danny home. The hard candies had fallen out of his bag and were scattered across the sidewalk. He got down on his knees, hurrying to pick them up, doing everything he could to avoid eye contact with Hector and the others. But when he reached for the last one, Hector's big, stupid basketball shoe was on top of it. The older boy leaned over and picked it up. Jolly Rancher, huh? Not bad. Not great, but not bad. He waved it in Danny's face, making him look up from all fours, like a dog at its master. I asked you what's in the bag, Mendoza. Nothing. It's for my mama. For your mama. Oh, isn't that sweet? Hector's fingers hooked under Danny's chin and lifted. Danny didn't fight. He knew it wasn't going to help, but he still flinched when he saw Hector's round, sweaty face so close, the angry, pale, yellow-brown eyes. Hector Viaba even had the beginnings of a real mustache, a hairy smudge on his upper lip. It was one of the things that made him so scary, one of the reasons why even bigger 12-year-olds like Chewy and Rojo let him lead them. A fifth grader with a mustache. Come on, open it up, Hector told him. Let's see what you got for your mama. When Danny still didn't offer up the bag, Hector's friend Chewy put a foot on Danny's back and pushed down so hard that Danny had to brace himself to keep from being shoved against the sidewalk. I said, show me, maricon, said Hector. Chewy gonna break your spine. He knows karate. Danny handed Hector the bag, biting his lip, determined not to cry. Hector pulled out the big Hershey bar. Híjole, he said. Look at that. Something for your mama. Shit, you were going to eat that all by yourself. Not even share none with us. That's cold, man. It is from my mother. It is. Danny pushed up against Chewy's heavy hiking boot, trying to reach the candy bar, which didn't look anywhere near so huge, clamped in Hector Viaba's plump, dirty fingers. Chewy took his weight off for a moment, then kicked Danny in the ribs hard enough to make him drop to the concrete and hug himself in pain. If you try anything else, we'll hurt you good, said Hector, laughing as he unwrapped the candy bar. He tossed a piece to Chewy, then another to Rojo, who grabbed it out of the air and shoved it in his mouth like a starving dog, then licked his fingers. Hector leaned down and gave Danny another shove, hard enough to crash him against the fence again. Don't you ever try to hide anything from me. I know where you live, dude. I'll come over and slap the bitch out of you and your mama both. He pointed to the hard candies still clutched in Danny's hands. Get that other shit too, yo, Hector told Rojo, and the big freckled kid bent Danny's fingers back until he surrendered it all. The Christmas chocolate bar, looking sad and naked with half its foil peeled away, was still clutched in Hector's hand as he and his friends rode away laughing, sharing the hard candy out of the bag. For a while, Danny just sat on the cold sidewalk and wished he had a knife or even a gun, and he could kill Hector Villalba, even if it made Jesus unhappy for weeks. At that moment, Danny almost felt like he could do it. The rotten, mean bastard had taken his mom's present. At last, Danny wiped his eyes and continued home. It was starting to get dark, and the wind was suddenly cold, which made his scratched-up hands ache. When he reached the apartment, he let himself in, dropped his book bag by the door, then called a greeting to his mama, feeding Danny's baby sister in the kitchen as he hurried on to the bathroom so he could clean up his scratches and tear-stained face and do his best to hide the damage to the knees of his pants before she saw him up close. It wouldn't do any good to tell her what had happened. She couldn't do anything, and it would make her very sad. Danny was used to keeping quiet about what went on between home and school, school and home. After a while, he went out and sat at the table and watched as his mother fed green goop to the baby. Even her smile for Danny looked tired. Mama worked so hard to keep them all fed and dressed, hardly ever yelled, and even sang old songs from Mexico for Danny and his brothers when she wasn't too tired. And now that cabron Hector had stolen her presents, and he didn't have any money left to get her something else. Later that night, when the house was quiet and everyone was asleep, Danny found himself crying again. It was so unfair. What had happened to the Christmas luck? Or did that kind of thing only happen to other kids, other families? Please, Jesus, he prayed quietly, I just have to get Mama something for Christmas. Something Hector can't take. If that's a miracle, okay. I mean, I know you can't do them all the time, but if you got one, an extra one. Something woke him up later, a strange noise in the living room. For a moment he lay in bed wondering if Santa Claus might have come, but then he remembered it was still 3 days until Christmas. Still, he could definitely hear something moving, a kind of quiet, fluttery sound. His brothers were both sprawled in boneless little boy sleep across the mattress they shared, so he climbed carefully over them and made his way out to the living room. At first he saw nothing more unusual than the small Christmas tree on top of the coffee table, but as he stared, his eyes trying to get used to the dark, he saw the tree was moving? Yes, moving, the top of the pine wagging like a dog's tail. Danny had never heard of a Christmas tree coming to life, not even in a TV movie, and it scared him. He picked up the tennis racket with the missing strings Luis kept promising to fix, then crawled toward the scraggly tree with its ornaments of foil and cut paper. As he got closer, he could see that something small was caught in the tree's topmost branch, trying to fly away but not succeeding. He could hear its wings beating so fast they almost buzzed. A bird trapped in the apartment? A really big moth? Danny looked for one of the baby's bowls to trap it, then had a better idea and crept to the kitchen cabinet where his mom kept the washed jars. He picked a big one that had held sandwich spread and slithered commando style back to the living room. Whatever the thing was, it was really stuck, tugging and thrashing as it tried to free itself from the pine needles. He dropped the jar over it and pulled carefully on the branch until the thing could finally get free. Then Danny clapped the lid on the jar to keep it from escaping. The thing inside the jar went crazy now, flying against the glass, the wings going so fast that it made him hard to see for certain what it was. The strange thing was, it actually looked like a person. A tiny, tiny little person, no bigger than a sparrow. That was crazy. Danny knew it was crazy. He knew he had to be dreaming. What are you doing? The thing said in a tiny, rasping voice. It didn't sound happy at all. Let me go! Danny was so startled to hear it talk that he nearly dropped the jar. He held it up to the light coming in from the street lamp to get a better look. The prisoner in the jar was a little lady. A lady with wings. A real honest-to-goodness Christmas miracle. Are you an angel? He asked. Let me out, young man, and we'll talk about it. She didn't sound much like an angel. Actually, she sounded a lot like that scratchy-voiced nanny on that TV show his mama watched sometimes. Her hair was yellow and kind of wild and sticky-uppy, and she wore a funny little dancing dress. She was also carrying a bag over her shoulder, like Santa did, except that hers wasn't much bigger than Danny's thumb. Promise you won't fly away? He asked the strange small person. If I let you out? She had her tiny hands pressed up against the inside of the jar. She shook her head so hard, her sparkly little crown almost fell off. Promise! But hurry up, I don't like the enclosed places. Honest, it makes me want to scream. Let me out, please. Okay, but no cheating. He unscrewed the lid on the jar and slowly turned it over. The tiny lady rose up, fluttering into the light that streamed through the living room window. Oh, that's so much better, she said. I got stuck in a panoramic Easter egg once, wedged between a frosting bunny and a cardboard flower pot. Thought I was going to lose my mind. Wow, he said. Who are you? What are you? She carefully landed on the floor near his knee. I'm a Sugarplum Fairy, she said, like in that ballet. Huh? Never mind. Look, thanks for getting me loose from that tree. She turned herself around, trying to look down at herself. Rats! Ripped my skirt. I hate conifers. She turned back to Danny. I didn't mean to scare you. I was just passing through the neighborhood when I felt somebody thinking candy thoughts. Real serious candy thoughts. I mean, it was like someone shouting. Anyway, that's what we do, us Sugarplum Fairies. We handle the candy action, especially at Christmas time. So I thought I should come and check it out. Was it you? Because if it was, you got the fever bad, kid. She reached into her bag and produced a lollipop bigger than she was, something that couldn't possibly have fit in there. Here, have one on me. You look like you need it. Wow. Wow. He suddenly realized he was talking out loud and dropped his voice, worried that he would wake up his mama and Luis. He reached out for the lollipop. You're really a fairy. Do you know Jesus? She shrugged. I think he's in another department. What's your name? It's Danny, isn't it? He nodded. Yeah? It suddenly struck him. You know my name? I got it all written down somewhere. She started riffling through her bag again, then pulled out something that looked like a tiny phone book. She took out an equally small pair of glasses, opened the book, and began reading. For some reason, you fell off the list here, Danny. No wonder you're so desperate. You haven't had a Sugarplum delivery in quite a while. Well, that at least I can do something about. She frowned as she took a pen out of the apparently bottomless bag and made a correction. Of course, they may not process the new order until early next year, and I'm not scheduled back in this area until Valentine's Day. She frowned. Doesn't seem fair. A moment later, her tiny face brightened. Hey, since you saved me from that tree branch, I think I'm allowed to give you a wish. Would you like that? Really? A wish? Yeah, I can do that. You'll give me a wish? Like magic? A wish? She frowned again. Come on, kid. I know you've been shorted on candy the last couple of years, but is your blood sugar really that low? I just very clearly said I will give you a wish. We're allowed to when someone helps out. He was so excited he could barely sit still. It was a Christmas miracle after all, a real one. Could I wish for like $1 million? Then, even if Luis didn't find another job for a while, the family would be okay, more than okay. She shook her head. Sorry, kid, no. I only do candy-related wishes. You want one of those extra big gummy bears? I hear those are popular this year. I could bend some rules and get it to you by Christmas. He was tempted. He'd seen an ad on television. But now it was his turn to shake his head. Could I just get a big Hershey bar? One of those extra big ones? From my mother? The little woman tilted her head up so she could see him better from where she stood, down on the ground. Truly? Is that all you want? Gee, kid, I could feel the desperation coming off this house, like Weird off an elf. Sure you don't want something a little more substantial? A pile of candy, maybe? A year's supply of gumdrops or something? As long as it's candy related, I can probably get it done for you, but you better decide quick. She pulled out quite a large pocket watch on a chain out of her bag. Then put on her glasses again. After midnight, and I still have half my rounds to go. She looked at him. You seem like a nice kid, Danny, and it doesn't look like you guys are exactly swimming in presents and stuff. How about a nice pile of candy? Assorted types? Or if you'd rather just concentrate on, what did you say, Hershey bars? I could probably arrange a shopping bag of those or something. For a moment, his head swam at the prospect of a grocery bag full of giant chocolate bars, more than Hector the Butthead Viaba could ever dream of having, no matter how much he stole. But then another idea came floating up from deep down in Danny's thoughts. A strange, dark idea. Can you do all kinds of wishes? Really, all kinds? Yeah, but just one. And it definitely has to be candy related. I'm not a miracle worker or anything. Okay, then I'll tell you what I want. Danny could suddenly see it all in his imagination, and it was very, very good. The school holiday party was nice. Danny and his classmates played games and sang songs and had a snack of fruit and cheese and crackers. Nobody brought Chips Ahoy cookies, but one of the mothers did indeed bring cupcakes. Delicious chocolate ones with silver, green, and red sprinkles for Christmas. There were even enough left over that although Danny had finished his long ago, despite making it last as long as possible, he was allowed to take home the last two for his little brothers. He suspected that the teacher knew his family didn't have much money, but for this one day it didn't embarrass him at all. After the bell rang, Danny followed the other third graders toward the school gate, holding one cupcake carefully in each hand, his book bag draped over his shoulder. He was watching his feet so carefully that he didn't see what made the other children suddenly scatter to either side. But as soon as he heard the voice, he knew the reason. "Look at that! It's Maricon Mendoza, yo!" said Hector Viaba. "What did you bring us for Christmas, kid?" Danny looked up. The mustached monster was sitting astride his bike just a few yards down the sidewalk, flanked by Rojo and Chewy. "Oh, yeah, dude, cupcakes," said Hector. "You remembered our Christmas presents." He scooted his bike forward until he stood directly over Danny, then reached out for the cupcakes. Danny couldn't help it. He jerked back when Hector tried to take them, even though he knew it would probably earn him another bruising. "Punch the little chulo's face in," Rojo suggested. Hector dropped his bike with a clatter. The other kids from school, who had stopped to stare in horrified fascination, jumped out of his way as he strode forward and grabbed the cupcakes out of Danny's hands. He peeled the paper off one and shoved the whole cupcake in his mouth and tossed the other to Chewy. "You two split that," he said through a mouthful of devil's food, then turned his attention back to Danny, who was so scared and excited that he felt like electricity was running through him. Next time, you better remember to bring one for each of us, Mendoza. You only bring two, that's going to get your ass kicked. Danny backed away. It was hard to look into those yellow-brown eyes and not run crying, let alone keep thinking clearly, but Danny did his best. He dropped his book bag to the ground, and out fell the stringless tennis racket that he had brought from home. Hector hooted with angry laughter as Danny snatched it up and held it before him as if it was a cross and Hector was a vampire. "¿Qué? You going to try to hit me, little boy?" Hector laughed again, but he didn't sound happy. He didn't like it when people stood up to him. "I'll take that away from you and beat your ass black and blue, Mendoza." The bully took a step nearer and held out his hand. "Give it to me, or I'll break your fingers." "No." Danny wasn't going to step back any farther. He lifted the racket, waved it around like a baseball bat. It was old and flimsy, but he had come to school determined today. "You can't have it, you asshole." Behind Hector, Rojo let out a surprised chortle, but Hector Viaba didn't think it was funny at all. "That's it," he said, curling his hands into fists. "After I kick your ass, I'm going to rub your face in dog shit. Then I'm going to kick your ass again. You're going to spend Christmas in the hospital." Without warning, he charged toward Danny. Danny stepped to the side and swung the racket as hard as he could, hitting Hector right in the stomach. With a whoop of surprise and pain, Hector bent double, but when he looked up, he didn't look hurt, just really, really mad, his eyes staring like a crazy dog's eyes. "That's it. I'm going to get you, Mendoza," he said, then sucked in air and stood up straight. But even as he did so, a funny expression crossed his face, and he looked down at where he was holding his belly. Hector's hands were suddenly full of crackling, cellophane-wrapped hard candy, so many of them that they cascaded over his fingers and onto the ground. He lifted his hands in disbelief to look, and dozens more of the candies slid out of the front of his open jacket. Candy bars, too, fun size, and even regular ones. Snickers bars, Mounds, Tootsie Rolls, lollipops, candy canes, even spicy tamarindos. The other children from the school stared in horrified fascination, guessing that Danny had broken a bag that Hector had been carrying under his coat. They were so scared of Hector that they didn't move an inch toward any of the candy that was still slithering out of the big boy's coat and pooling on the ground at his feet. "Oh, man," one of the other third graders said in a hoarse whisper. "Mendoza's going to get beat up so bad." But even more candy was pouring out of Hector's belly now, as if someone had turned on a candy faucet. A great river of sweets running out of the place where Danny had knocked him open with his old tennis racket. "What?" Then Hector Viaba looked down at himself and began to scream in terror. Candy was showering out of him faster and faster onto the sidewalk, already piled as high as the cuffs of his pants, and still coming. "Híjole, dude," said Rojo. "You're a piñata." Hector looked at him, eyes rolling with fear. Then he turned and sprinted away down the street, squealing like a kindergartner, a flood of candy still pouring from him. Crunch bars, M&Ms, plain and peanut, as well as boxes of gumdrops and wax-wrapped pieces of taffy, all raining onto the street around the bully's legs, bouncing and rolling. Rojo and Chewy watched Hector run for a moment, then turned to stare at Danny with a mixture of apprehension and confusion. They turned from him to look at each other, came to some kind of agreement, and threw themselves down on their knees to start scooping up the candy that had fallen out of Hector Viaba. Within a few seconds, the other school kids were all scrambling across the ground beside them, everybody shoveling candy into their pockets as fast as they could. Danny waited until he wasn't breathing so hard, then started for home, following the clear trail of candy that had gushed from Hector Viaba as he ran. He didn't bother to pick up everything, since for once in his life he could afford to be selective. He stuffed one pocket of his jacket with candy for his brothers, then filled the other just with Butterfinger bars, at least 6 or 7, but kept walking with his head down until he spotted a nice big Hershey bar in good condition, which he zipped in his book bag so that it would stay safe for his mother. The rest of the way home he picked up whatever looked interesting and threw it into the book bag too, until by the time he reached home he was staggering with the weight up the apartment building walkway. For once, Hector Viaba had been the one who had run home crying. He didn't feel sorry for Hector either. Not at all. Scared as the 5th grader was now, he would be all right when he reached home. Danny had made that a part of the wish, and the fairy had said she thought it was a good idea. Jesus didn't want even mean kids to die from having their guts really fall out, Danny felt pretty sure. So he had done his best not to spoil the Lord's birthday. Of course, Hector Viaba probably wouldn't have a very merry Christmas, but Danny had decided that Jesus could probably live with that. And that's the end. So as I said, not a deep exploration of existential dread or anything like that. Just a silly Christmas story. All right, so I am going to hook it up and leave a bit early tonight since it is Christmas Eve and I haven't wrapped any presents yet. I know. I'm ashamed of myself too. But I do want to thank you all for spending time with me during the past year, well, the past several years now, and to say happy holidays to you all. I do very much appreciate your time and interaction. And I will be seeing you next week when we will go back to The Witchwood Crown and we will continue reading that because we're just about to get to the exciting part with all the little under the ground guys who come up, and all that kind of stuff. Until that point of next week, be good to yourselves, take good care of yourselves, take good care of your loved ones, friends, and neighbors, and we will all make it through somehow, through this obstacle course we call life, through this funhouse ride that we call existence. So, in loving memory of those whom we have lost and in hope for those who will be here after we are gone, I say to you, happy holidays. And even though I'm a little early on this one and you'll probably see me before it, Happy New Year. Hope your 2024 is a great one. And I will see you very soon. Peace and good night.